And in those races, not one single seat moved from one party to the other party.
All right, let's bring in Republican strategist Spencer Sullivan and Democratic strategist Michael Starr Hopkins to talk about this. I guess the grand scheme of things, all this money put into this race, there was so much attention paid to it. Anybody surprised with this outcome?
I don't think many folks are surprised. I think one of the funny things here is that as Democrats have tried to make this a referendum against President Trump, they're 0-4. And to be honest with you, most of these special elections have been referendums against Nancy Pelosi.
Michael Starr Hopkins, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I have to disagree with Spencer there. This was not a referendum on Donald Trump. In fact, John Ossoff didn't mention Trump in the closing months of the election. Moral victories in this kind of situation, I'm not really a big fan of, but I think there are some positives that Democrats can take away from. We managed to get new voters registered in Georgia. We managed to excite the base. And this was a place where Democrats overperformed.
But you say this was there were a lot of good things to take away for Democrats here, but the Democrats spent a boatload of money to get this newcomer elected, and a lot of people thought this would be a referendum on the Trump presidency. After everything that's gone on, they thought this would fire up people to go out and vote, but it didn't end up like that.
Exactly. I think one of the things here is not only did the Democrats spend more money, right? They very adamantly have made this a referendum against Donald Trump. They continue to lack candidate recruitment. For their best candidate to be a D.C. Hill staffer who couldn't even vote for himself, against a Republican, Karen Handel, who had long, deep roots within that community, is part of the problem.
Well, and you mentioned that too, and that I believe is valid criticism because that was used in the race here. But when you look at that drain the swamp mentality, granted you're not talking about Washington itself, but Handel's been pretty entrenched in D.C. or in politics in Georgia, rather. She ran a couple of times. Michael, is this a matter of the Democrats maybe not exactly? Could there have been a better candidate for this race?
I think hindsight's 20/20. You can always say that there's a better candidate, but I got to correct Spencer on one thing. John Ossoff was from that district, and the only reason he wasn't registered there was because he had left for school. So this wasn't an issue of carpetbagging.
I guess that begs that old famous political phrase called it, if you're explaining, you're losing, right?
Well, let's speaking of Ossoff, let's show that concession speech because we showed you Handel at the top. Here's what Ossoff said as he conceded the race last night.
At a time when politics has been dominated by fear and hatred and scapegoating and division, this community stood up. Women in this community stood up. We showed them that we can still build coalitions of people who may not see eye to eye on everything, but rather than demonizing each other, we find common ground to move forward. And that's the
Michael, let me ask you, what do the Democrats need to do moving forward as we start looking ahead to the midterm elections to ensure some wins?
Democrats need to be better about talking about kitchen table issues. Karen Handel didn't or doesn't believe that gay couples should be allowed to adopt. Karen Handel doesn't believe that there should be any form of living wage for individuals. That's out of the mainstream for where America is. And I think Democrats need to be better about pointing out those kind of issues and pointing out how out of the touch Republicans are. Because Democrats, we have the right message. It's a winning message, but we don't always have the best messenger. I think Ossoff was a great messenger in this instance, but I think overall we need to be better about recruiting Democrats who can make sure that Republicans and independents hear that message.
I feel like that messenger storyline, we've heard that a couple of times. We had those other special elections, and I want to get your take on the fact we have now two elections in this country, two gubernatorial elections, Virginia and New Jersey, that'll be coming up in November. And Spencer, I want to start with you. Will there be this national spotlight on this race in Virginia, which is a state that people say purple, 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 but it's gone blue, at least in terms of electing Terry McAuliffe and Mark Warner and Tim Kaine?
Look, I think it's only natural for after a presidential election to make special elections or upcoming 2017 year elections in the national spotlight. I do think the Democrats do have a problem here because Michael did touch to a couple of points. There was being out of touch. The fact that Nancy Pelosi has overseen much of this party. They've lost more House seats than I can imagine. That's pretty clear why they've been out of touch, right? And then the other thing here is the best candidate was a person from out of the district. It wasn't a person with community roots or someone who could communicate that within that message. And then you have the Democratic Party in this position where how far left can they run to appease their base?
All right, Democratic strategist Spencer Sullivan, Republican strategist Spencer Sullivan, Democratic strategist